Thanks for your company. We are home of independent, fearless and credible journalism. We are live on DSTV channel 421, GoTV channel 144 around the world at myjoyonline.com and on your digital television because we are free to air. The details now. A corruption risk assessment on procurements made to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic in Ghana has identified irregularities in contracts awarded. The assessment conducted by the Community Development Alliance with support from the Commonwealth Alliance found that contracts awarded to 4 Ghanaian garment manufacturing companies that had been given loans of $10 million through the Ghana Exim Bank to produce PPEs, face masks, medical scrubs, hospital gowns and headgears was without tender. The companies were also not registered with the Public Procurement Authority at the time the contract was awarded. Now let me give you more details in that particular document published earlier this week. All right, so let me just bring you that executive summary. It says this assessment addresses corruption risk associated with public procurement during the COVID-19 pandemic in Ghana. The assessment was carried out in March to April 2021. Now, this is important. It was based on a review of background documentation, including the National Legal Regulatory Framework for Public Procurement with focus on integrity-related issues, official records in both electronic and hard copy formats, checks with state agencies, and interviews, governance and anti-corruption experts, international regulatory framework, in particular World Bank directives on public procurement, have been taken into account for best practice evaluation. So when you scroll up, it says the assessment included an evaluation of the institutional framework in the field, including its operational capacity, sufficiency of integrity mechanisms, control and sanctions. Individual interviews have been held with stakeholders of the national procurement, that's regulators, contracting authorities, control bodies, and civil society organizations, to identify problems and risk sectors. So we've been joined by the executive director of the Community Development Alliance, Salifu Canton, for more on this. Pardon me, earlier I said this was done in consultation or with support from the Commonwealth Foundation, rather. Thank you so much for your time here this morning, sir. First, let's start off basics first. Why the need for this assessment? Apology for the loss in sound there. It appears we have a challenge in Mr. Canton's sound. We'll try and work on it. But while we do so, let me just try and bring you some more findings on that risk assessment. We'll quickly put up the document on the screen and share the details with you. So the following conclusions have been made. When you come down, you see that there's a headline that says the following conclusions have been made. Okay, so the government of Ghana has accessed and utilized 12,440,710,000 cedis from sources such as the World Bank, IMF, Ghana Stabilization Fund, Contingency Fund of the Stabilization Fund, Ghana Heritage Fund, Ghana Exim Bank, and the COVID-19 Trust Fund set up by government. And we know that a lot of your contributions as individuals and private sector went into that. Now it says this assessment clusters Ghana's COVID-19 corruption risks around 2 main issues. The first is irregular procurement practices that violates Ghana procurement laws and corruption risks that indicates that there's been substantial breaches of anti-corruption laws, regulations, codes, and international conventions and best practices. Thankfully, we've got Mr. Canton back to share more on this assessment conducted by his organization with us. I was asking you for the basics first. What warranted this risk assessment?
Well, thank you, my dear sister. I hope that you can hear me loud and clear now.
Much better, sir.
Okay. So if you do recall, sometime in March, we recorded our first COVID-19 case in 2020. Following that, our government marshaled a lot of resources and efforts to try and contain the pandemic and ensure that the Ghanaian citizens are protected against this dreaded global pandemic. Having traversed the rollout of our national response to containment of COVID-19, we have done barely a year, and thankfully we are inching close to moving from a response and relief program to a recovery initiative. Within that context, we that we needed to do some stock taking of how well we have managed this crisis situation, and to see whether or not there are some lessons that we can learn from this. And to do that, the best way is to generate a certain body of evidence. So to conduct a corruption risk assessment came in immediately as one very useful action that could set the stage for this very hard and difficult conversations around COVID-19 financial accountability issue. So if you asked me why this, I say that we are doing so exactly because we are now moving from a response and relief program to a recovery phase. So we need to learn from the response and relief actions to inform our recovery actions so that our country can be better off.
All right, so let's quickly delve into the findings. One of them, which was quite topical, especially during the vetting of now Health Minister, had to do with Frontiers Healthcare Solution Services. There's been a lot of conversation on that already. Let's come to the second point in your executive summary with your findings on the $1 million contract awarded to develop the COVID-19 tracker app to two foreign companies, namely iQuint Technologies and Ascent Digital Solutions. You say that was registered in Jersey, a tax haven, and you say it was irregular. The two companies were not legal persons in Ghana at the time of the contract awarded, and they were not registered with the PPA and did not go through tender. I'm asking you this question because we have a response on this, especially from the communications minister, but I'll just like you to tell us how you arrived at this conclusion on this particular contract.
Well, I'm sure I'm very grateful you brought that up. We've basically laid out clearly how we went about this work, reviewing documentation, key interviews of key persons we believe to have relevant information that's useful for the kind of work like this, and all of that. So from the sources and the analysis of information available to us, we came to the conclusion that this particular contract, as captured in this report, for these two companies really had irregular issues related to how the services were procured. We have had various input from different government sources also as to whether or not these were public funds or whether or not government has made that specific expenditure related to this. But from the sources we pick up, clearly we got the sense that this contract was quite irregular to the extent that the companies were not legal entities in Ghana and they were not registered with the PPA and could not have, on the basis of our own regulations, been beneficiaries of these contracts. So we are basically putting that out there and saying that, look, as far as we are concerned, these contracts, as we saw them and the information available to us are, we are convinced, we think that there's something about this contract that potentially is a red flag that requires more clarity. So if government is coming forward with explanations as to what really the facts are about this contract, for us it's all the good for it. All
right, you quote a sum, $1 million. What is the evidence to prove that that sum was actually given in the award of this contract? How did you come to that conclusion?
Well, I've just told you that every fact contained in this report is generated from documentation we have reviewed and have access to, We have talking about interviews of key informants that provided information we reasonably believe to be true, on the basis of which we have analyzed and captured same in this report.
Okay.
So where exists contrary information from government that brings clarity to it, for us, we think it is good. So we have put it out. If there is sufficient information that contradicts what we have put out, then that information will be helping inform the Ghanaian people as to the facts relating to this contract.
All right, I'll come back to you, Mr. Cantor.